Shalom and welcome everyone to this teaching from Messianic Delaware. My name is Jerry Mitchell, and it is such a pleasure for you to join me today. Folks, you don't know what it means to us when we look down at the statistics and we see how many people have been looking at these teachings, and just really lightens our hearts a little bit to know that you're enjoying them. And we hope that we can continue to bring these, and you can continue to enjoy these for a long time. Today, something a little special, and I'll give you a warning. Um, well, maybe I should give you a confession. My confession is, okay, I did not expect this particular teaching to go where it went. So I'm bringing this together in a way that might seem like we're chasing around the mulberry bush just a little bit, but if you stick with me, I think you're going to get something at the end of this that you weren't expecting. Because I knew I wanted to look at Passover. Absolutely knew I wanted to look at Passover. We're coming up on that season again, and I knew that I wanted to do something with Passover and look at it to see how the language, the way we may have been using it, might be changing what we think about Passover a little bit. Now, if you remember, I talked last time that Hebrew, Greek, and some other Semitic languages are action-based. They concentrate on the verb, the action of a sentence, where English concentrates on the subject of a sentence. So if we keep that in mind, what can we learn about Passover? Have we been concentrating on an outcome, or are there something else involved? Have we missed something really important in this language? We know that Passover actually projects the crucifixion, resurrection. Okay, that's understood. But again, that's the final product, if you will. What are we missing by skipping to that final product if we're not concentrating on what's going on in the midst of it? So that's kind of what I want to look at, and it led me some places I didn't expect. I really didn't expect it to go. Now, Passover, or Pesach in Hebrew, is first found in Exodus 12. All right, and it says in Exodus 12:11, "Thus you will eat it with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand. You will eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover." And I've included, if you can look at the slides here, it's right there in plain Hebrew on the slides. And once again, we're going to go back, and I have to absolutely make sure that I state it's not a Jewish feast. It says right there that it belongs to the Almighty. Okay? It's right there in plain Hebrew for you to say. In English, it even says it is the Lord's Passover. Nothing has changed since these instructions were given except the rules of men. And that's going to be important as we look through this, because some of the rules of men have actually interfered with the lessons we learn from Passover. Okay? If we look at Numbers 9, 1 through 14, okay, we're going to go through this hopefully very quickly until we get to a certain point. It says that the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the first month of the second year. Now, they've been in here a while, okay? This is the second year. Okay, they came out of Egypt 1 year ago. They're beginning the first month of their second year, okay? And he said to Moses, "Let the children of Israel keep the Passover at this appointed season, at this appointed time. In the 14th day of the month, in the evening, you shall keep his appointed season according to all the rites of it, according to all the ceremonies thereof. You will keep it." And Moses spoke to the children of Israel that they should keep the Passover, and they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the first month at even in the wilderness of Sinai, according to all that the Lord had commanded Moses. So did the children of Israel. In other words, God said, "Moses, you're going to tell them that they're going to continue eating the Passover. We're just starting the second year. You're going to do this all over again." Remember, Leviticus isn't written yet. Technically, at this point, Leviticus is not written yet. So what we have is God saying, here you go, Moses. It's the 14th day of the first month. It's Passover time. Get them together. Tell them they're going to do this. Now, as we continue, there were certain men who were defiled by a dead body of a man. We can speculate a little bit here that maybe they were on burial detail. Don't know for sure. But that's okay. They had touched a dead body. Normally, you would be unclean for 7 days. Okay? So, where am I at? Oh, they came to the dead body of a man. That they could not keep the Passover on that day. And they came to Moses and Aaron and said, we're defiled by a dead body of a man, wherefore we are kept back. We may not offer an offering of the Lord. Doesn't say to the Lord, it says of the Lord, in his appointed season among the children of Israel. Moses said to them, okay? Moses said to the men, you stand still. Don't you go anywhere. I want to hear what the Lord will command concerning you. Pay attention to this. This is important stuff. I want to hear what God says concerning you. The Lord spoke to Moses, and he said, speak to the children of Israel and tell them, if any man of you or of your posterity shall be unclean by reason of a dead body, or be in a journey far off, he will still keep the Passover unto the Lord. Now, there's a whole lot of things in here we need to unpack. In fact, there's a whole lot of things through all of this we need to unpack. Just because you touch a dead body doesn't mean you can't eat the Passover. Just because you're on a journey somewhere else doesn't mean you can't eat the Passover. In fact, it's the only feast, the only Moedim, the only appointed time out of all of them. We are specifically told if you're on a journey somewhere, you still do this. Now, how would you know what month it was? You know, there were ways of keeping track of these things. A whole nother teaching, all right? But even if you're on a journey somewhere else, you keep the Passover on the day that you need to keep it where you are. Hope that made sense to you. Because it's that important. This is something that you have to do. The offering that was made of the Lord, not to the Lord, but an offering of the Lord in his appointed season. We're giving him something, but it's of him, not to him. Okay? As we continue reading, the 14th day of the second month at the even they shall keep it, and eat it with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs. They shall leave none of it until the morning, nor break any of the bones of it. Wait a minute. They're getting manna at this point, right? Now, if they're getting manna, remember all the stories about those poor Israelites? All they had to eat for all those years in the wilderness was manna. Here we see bitter herbs. Here we see lamb being eaten at Passover. And this is in the desert. Okay, this is during their journey in the wilderness, just before Leviticus is written. This is what's going on. This is what's happening. Now, this kind of throws a monkey wrench into some things that you may have heard about, but that's okay. We're looking at what's written. We're not worried about the tradition. So don't let the traditions interfere with what is written. But the man that is clean and is not. Oh, wait a minute. Let me start over. The 14th day of the second month at the even they shall keep it. They shall eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. So now we're eating. They're not going to leave any of it till morning. They're not going to break any of the bones of it. According to the ordinances of the Passover, they shall keep it. But the man that is clean and is not in a journey and forbeareth, or he avoids eating it to keep the Passover, he avoids keeping the Passover, oh my, even the same shall be cut off from among his people, because he brought not the offering. What offering? What was the offering? It was the offering of the Lord, not to the Lord. We know that. So what's going on here? What do we need to figure out? Oh, when I bring this together for you at the end, you're going to be amazed. Okay. The man shall bear his sin. Okay, that's the guy who refuses to eat, even though he's eligible to eat. And if a stranger shall sojourn among you, and will keep the Passover unto the Lord according to the ordinance of the Passover, and according to the manner thereof, so shall he do. In other words, you can't turn somebody away. If he's so interested, he wants to know what this is all about, you can't turn him away. You will have one ordinance, both for the stranger and for him that was born in the land. Now, I kind of call this part stranger danger, all right? Because we need to be careful. A stranger coming into the land is not going to be circumcised, is he? This is important when we get to the next section, because you've got to remember there's one ordinance, one law for the homeborn and for the stranger who comes alongside, says, you know, I don't know what it is about you. You're doing something special. Something's going on. I want to be part of this. Okay. We get to Joshua. This is 40. We're going to skip ahead 40 years. Well, actually 39 years. Okay. Joshua 5, beginning in verses 10 through 12. And then I'm going to back up a little bit. On the evening of the 14th day of the month, while camped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho, the Israelites celebrated Passover. The third day, I'm sorry. I added the third. Don't skip that part. The day after the Passover, that very day, they ate some of the produce of the land, unleavened bread and roasted grain. The manna stopped the day after they ate this food from the land. There was no longer any manna for the Israelites, but that year they ate the produce of Canaan. Isn't that interesting? So, 40 years wandering around the wilderness. Not exactly wandering around, they were guided, okay? They knew where to go because of the pillar of fire. They knew everything that was going on. Things are beginning to transition for the Hebrews because they've entered the land. Things are getting ready to change. God's not changing, but he's changing the circumstances around them, around the Hebrew people. Because now that they're in the land, he's made certain promises to them. He's got to be able to fulfill these promises in such a way that it brings glory to him and the Israelite people are safe. Okay? Now, here's where I ran into my dilemma just a little bit. Because when I read these passages, I don't just read what you're getting here. I read everything that surrounds it. Because I want to know what's going on. I want to know what they're talking about. And if we start back at the beginning of Joshua 5, it says, it came to pass, when all the kings of the Amorites, which were on the side of the Jordan westward, okay, they were west of the Jordan, and all the kings of the Canaanites, which were by the sea, heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of the Jordan. Okay, so here, now 40 years ago, remember they heard what God had done. Now they're hearing it again. Now they're hearing it again because this says Jordan, right? This doesn't say Red Sea. This is the waters of the Jordan. He dried up the waters of the Jordan from before the children of Israel until we were passed over, that their heart melted. Neither was their spirit in them any more, because of the children of Israel. At that time the Lord said unto Joshua, let's stop just a second here. These kings knew they were in trouble. These kings understood what was going on and what was about to happen. They knew what God had promised. And they were nervous. They were upset. It's kind of like today. You have people that want to rebel against God, they know what's coming, and they'll do anything that they can to put it off. But let's continue here. At that time the Lord said to Joshua, "Make these sharp knives and circumcise again the children of Israel the second time." Wait a minute. Slow up. Let's go back here for a second into the Hebrew, because it actually says, and I mean literally actually says, that you will make knives of flint. Okay, he tells them specifically to use a flint knife. I had a family member years ago that used to joke about, would you rather be circumcised with a dull knife or a sharp rock? And that's about as far as I want to go with that. But we know that it was flint. A lot of times these natural stones like flint and obsidian, you can sharpen them down and they will be more sharp than a doctor's or a surgeon's scalpel. That's how sharp you can get flint and obsidian. But they're told specifically to use flint. Now we can't stop reading here. We've got to keep going, because this just takes in too much. And I hope I can get through it in a timely fashion. Joshua made sharp knives of flint and circumcised the children of Israel at the hill of foreskins. And this is the cause why Joshua did circumcise. Okay, this is why Joshua had to circumcise the people. All the people that came out of Egypt that were male, even all the men of war, died in the wilderness. By the way, they just died. You remember the people, 39 years ago, had to bury dead bodies. People were dying. They were going through their life. This wasn't a fairy tale magical thing. This was everyday life that they had to deal with. Okay? So we have these people that were dying in the wilderness after they came out of Egypt. Now, all the people that came out were circumcised, but all the people that were born in the wilderness, by the way, as they came forth out of Egypt, had not been circumcised. Now, this leads us into a real predicament, doesn't it? See, all the males that were born in the wilderness, everybody that was 40 years old and younger had not been circumcised. They hadn't been touched. Which means a big problem for some of the Pharisees and Sanhedrin about 1,600 years later. Because what this means is that uncircumcised Hebrew children celebrated Passover. Uncircumcised Hebrew men who had children were celebrating Passover. This means that people were just like the strangers who came in who were not circumcised, who said, I see what's going on and I want to be part of it. They weren't circumcised. All right, let's keep reading. For the children of Israel walked 40 years in the wilderness till all the people that were men of war which came out of Egypt were consumed. That would be except for Joshua and Caleb. Because they obeyed not the voice of the Lord, unto whom excuse me, unto whom he Lord sware that he would not show them the land, which the Lord sware unto their fathers that he would give us, a land that flows with milk and honey. And their children, whom he raised up in their stead. Okay, so he raises these children up. These are the ones that Joshua circumcised. For they were not circumcised. They were uncircumcised. Because they had not been circumcised, by the way, when they were in the wilderness. Okay? And it came to pass, when they had done circumcising all the people, that they abode in their place in the camp until they were whole. They laid up in their tents until the pain subsided. Okay? Now here's the thing that we need to get straight. And it's going to lead me into something here. We need to stop thinking about circumcision as a finished product. It's not a finished product. It's an ongoing process. And when you think of, I know, guys, I'm sorry, this is making you cringe. Deal with it. Circumcision is an ongoing process. Paul is explaining this in Romans 2 when he says to the Greeks, now remember that the Greeks were going to understand this because theirs is a verb-based language. And he says, circumcision is indeed worthwhile if you keep the Torah. Let me read that part again. Circumcision is indeed worthwhile if you keep the Torah. But if you break the Torah, your circumcision has become uncircumcision. See what I mean? You can't think of it as the finished product. Paul's not talking about the flesh here, is he? Therefore, if the uncircumcised keeps the righteous decrees of the Torah, will not his uncircumcision be counted as circumcision? Indeed, the one not circumcised physically who fulfills the Torah will judge you, who even with the written code and circumcision break the Torah. Even though you know what the written rules are, if you violate it and you're circumcised, you are now considered uncircumcised. For one is not a Jew who is one outwardly, nor is circumcision something visible in the flesh. That's the final product that we all want to concentrate on. Okay, stop thinking about that, because he goes on and he says, the circumcision is one of the heart, in spirit, not in the letter, not in what's written down, not in what's the instructions on how to proceed with it. His praise is not from men, but from God. Now, when we think about that, it's an ongoing thing. It's an ongoing thing. It is a process, and it never ends. And here's why it never ends. And we're going to go through this a little bit. I've laid it out here, but I'm going to go through them one by one here in a minute. If we think about the manna as it's bread of life, that is Yeshua. If we think about the lamb, that is sacrifice, that is Yeshua. If we think about the bitter herbs, that is suffering, that is Yeshua. We think about the offering being from the heart, something that is given freely. Okay, more on that in a second. Circumcision is the continuous effort to follow God's instructions. Ma'al, circumcision, literally means the blood that binds us to the Creator's teaching, the blood that binds us to the Torah, destroying part of ourself so that we may be obedient to our Creator. Now, when I bring all this together, you're going to be amazed. The bread of life. In John 6:48 through 50, Yeshua said, I am the bread of life. Your ancestors ate manna in the wilderness, but they died. But here's the bread that comes down from heaven, which anyone may eat and not die. Now, we know that this is a direct reference to the blessing that we say before eating bread. Right? The Baruch atah Yehovah Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lachem min haaretz. Blessed are you, Yehovah, our God, King of the universe, who brings forth the bread from the earth. Now, most people, when they think about this, they're going to see, the plant that raises up and grows the grain. What Yeshua is saying is, look, Adam was formed. Adam was formed out of dirt. The bread you're looking at is the spirit of the one who is able to put all this together for you. And that was Yeshua. When we think about the lamb, we go to the sacrifice. John 1:29, the next day John sees Jesus coming onto him, and he says, behold the Lamb of God, which takes away the sin of the world. Okay? John identifies him specifically as the Lamb. Hopefully, well, I'm not going to go into that right now. Okay. I'm going to skip over that and just keep going while I'm going. I'm not going down that rabbit trail today. The bitter herbs, suffering. Again, it equals Yeshua. In Luke 24:46, he said to them, thus it is written, and thus it behooved Christ to suffer, to rise from the dead on the third day. In Exodus 12:8, You will eat it in the flesh in that night, roast with fire and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Think about Yeshua in the tomb. So think about it being in the tomb the same time as the lambs are in the oven. The herbs that they put on not only the lamb that they ate, okay? Herbs can also be used for anointing, for healing, for moving forward. It's not just a one-time thing. It's continuous, and it never, ever stops. Offering. Here we go. From the heart, something that is given freely. Abel brought of the firstlings of his flock and the fat thereof, and the Lord had respect to Abel and to his offering. You bring the best you have to offer. The offering that they're being talked about at Passover was not like a third of a shekel or a quarter shekel, whatever it was they would bring. The offering that they're talking about in Numbers is bringing yourself to be completely obedient. It's bringing oneself. Today, a lot of Christians think about, well, I've got to die to myself so I can follow God. I've got to die to myself so I can do this. A little bit has to die every day so I can move forward. Same kind of a principle, different kind of wording. What they're saying is what this is, that offering, that destruction of yourself, that dying of yourself, killing off the parts of your earthly desires, the desires of the flesh, as Paul calls them, the things that make us human, and we want to, okay, I'm going to go down this trail just a little bit. Somebody told me the other day, why is it that everything that tastes good has to be bad for us? My response was, so we know what's bad for us. If it tastes good, don't eat it, right? That seems to be how it is. Not always true, but it's a good generalization, and it makes a good joke. But here's the thing. You've got to do the best you can. And sometimes, you got to eat what doesn't taste that good. But our flesh says, man, I would really, really, really like to have like a whole pecan pie, right? Now, if you eat a whole pecan pie in one sitting, you're going to be sick because it is like straight up sugar. I mean, you might as well eat, a 5-pound bag of sugar. It's not good for you. It's just not good for you. But when you are willing to deny yourself that, to cut that off, to say, nope, I don't need that. I can die to that. I don't have to have that. I will do what's good for me. I will live the life my Creator designed me to live. That's that offering. That's that offering of the Lord. He's offering us the opportunity to live the way He designed us to live. Think about circumcision. It's continuous effort to follow God's instructions. Circumcision is indeed worthwhile if you're going to keep the Torah. But if you break the Torah, your circumcision has become uncircumcision. You can't do it physically, but you do it spiritually. Need to touch on something very quickly here. A woman cannot be physically circumcised. If a woman who is Gentile marries a Hebrew person, Hebrew male, does the Hebrew male's circumcision automatically cover her? According to Paul, the answer is no, because if you are not keeping Torah, then your circumcision has become uncircumcision, because it's not of the flesh, it is of the heart. It is your desires of your spirit, not the desires of your flesh. So, that being said, if a Gentile woman comes in alongside and sojourns or joins with the people, even though she's not married, if she chooses to maintain and keep Torah, is she now considered spiritually circumcised? Well, the answer is yes. Who would her covering be? Think about this very carefully. If she's not married, never been married, she's out, no longer part of her father's process. Who is her spiritual covering now? it must be the Almighty Himself, Yeshua, right? In the flesh, right? That's the way it works. Now, marries, if she marries and her husband's keeping Torah, then he then becomes her spiritual covering. If he dies, that spiritual covering remains because he's just kind of gone on. He isn't completely out of her life. She's never going to forget him, but he has moved on. He's in the next phase. He's in the next stage. And I'm not going to go into that a whole lot of detail. If you are really interested, check out Tradition to Truth, and in there's a couple of chapters I title This Place Called Heaven. You'll see what I mean. But don't think that because a woman cannot be physically circumcised, if she chooses to maintain Torah, she has a covering, and it's given to her directly by her Creator. Okay, tying this all up. Ma'al, circumcision, the blood that binds us to the Creator's teaching, His Torah. Think about Yeshua on the cross. His blood did what? His blood atoned for our mistakes, our sin. His blood renews the covenant. His blood renews the very thing that this circumcision binds us to. Without, let me say this very carefully, without Yeshua's death and bloodshed, circumcision would probably be meaningless today. And I say probably. There would more than likely have been another way. But without that death on the cross, as a result, and it is the accumulation of Passover, okay? Without that, would there be a covenant to bind us to? Would there be a Torah to bind us to? Would it still count? I'm not sure. What I am sure of is that that happened. And because what we can do is to follow our Creator's instructions, we can be bound to those instructions. And even in our, even if we are physically not circumcised, once you make that choice and you begin to follow those instructions, then what you have is circumcision of the heart that Paul talks about. That's why a lot of times people talk about, well, are you supposed to be circumcised or are you not supposed to be circumcised? Paul says, look, the outward circumcision, and I've actually heard it called an outward sign. You got to stop thinking about it that way. It's not. It's just kind of dumb because nobody's going around, well, I shouldn't say it that way. Nobody should be going around showing their circumcision. Okay? You can show the circumcision of your heart through your actions, but don't go around physically showing your circumcision. Yeah, that kind of gets weird, doesn't it? That really gets weird, especially when you think about some other things that are going on with that. But if you consider it not the final product, like we want to get hung up on, okay, that I was just kind of jokingly describing, I hope you got the joke on that. It was a joke, by the way. Probably not a good one, but it was a joke. Don't get hung up on that. It's a continuous thing. You've got to continuously be willing to destroy a little bit of yourself every day. When you remove a little bit of that fleshy heart every day and say, no, I don't want the pecan pie. No, I don't want to look at that. No, I don't want to listen to that particular show. No, I don't want to see that particular entertainment. No, I don't enjoy those magazines. No, you see where I'm going. And you choose to live the life that you were designed to live. That's circumcision of the heart. That's what Yeshua died for, to renew that covenant, to make it possible that we can maintain that. It can be brought back to life for us one more time. Yeshua's death is bloodshed that makes it possible to bind us to the teachings and the instructions that we get from our Creator. Through all of these things, we have to remember that it's not just a once and done type deal. You have to, it's a lifestyle. It's a life-changing lifestyle. And to be honest with you, it's a pleasant life-changing lifestyle. So don't get hung up thinking that it's a final product. You're eventually going to be done. You will never be finished. Because you've always got to be making the choices. I don't want what the world tells me I should have. I want what the Almighty designed me to have. Hope you see the difference. I hope that this made sense to you, and I hope that it has blessed you and explained many things for you. Until next time, Shalom.